Good evening, Sri Lanka. Welcome to another episode of iMed. Today we're going to talk about something a lot of people have been discussing about, which is thyroid glands, and thyroxine, something a lot of people needs to be aware of, the kind of impact it could create if it's not normal. So to talk more about this particular subject, we do have with us in the studios Dr. Noel Somasundaram, who is the consultant endocrinologist, Diabetes and Hormone Center. Good evening to you, doctor.
Good evening.
Let's start off with thyroid glands, what we call the butterfly at the base of the neck, and people talk a lot about how it could affect our lifestyles. So where do we start with this, doctor?
Yeah, thyroid gland is a very crucial hormone producing gland of the body. As you said, it's at the root of the neck, just the thumb size on both sides of the neck, and there are two glands, the right and the left, but although they are just tiny, it controls almost every part of the body, because the hormones that the thyroid gland produces, the thyroxine, the two types of thyroxine, the T4 and the T3, which are the active forms, control the rate at which the body produces, the body functions. So thyroxine hormones is taken up by every cell in the body, and then it's taken up into the gene, and then the thyroxine makes the gene work better. So it controls the rate at which the cell will then function. So for example, the rate at which the heart will work, the bowel will work, whether the menses will occur or not, and therefore whether conception will occur, and for a baby, newborn baby, whether the brain will develop and replicate and have connections, and therefore intelligence to develop, etc. So it's and for height to occur in a child, and for intelligence to occur, fertility, all that functions, it's essentials. So normally most people don't have a problem with that, and we don't even feel it there being there. It just help us sail through life as usual. But as we go up through puberty, aging, elderly, it just is there in the background to help us go through those excessive needs, sometimes the pubertal spurt. Sometimes during aging, it slows the body down so that the body can cope with. During severe illness, it slows the body down to cope with that severe illness, so that the body conserves energy, so that it doesn't waste away energy, and therefore is basically a survival mechanism in that stage. So it does a lot of those mechanisms in the background. Only when it goes wrong do we know that thyroid has gone wrong.
So that's something, doctor, you mentioned about the brain functionality, something that everyone needs to be aware of, and with what's produced and how it controls the entire system, it is one of the most important parts of our bodies. But we give very little awareness to it and thought to it, and I think a lot of people are not aware of how important it is. So what do we need to do to try and make people educate about this particular subject? Because I think even in school, for what we have taught and what we have learned over the years, we tend to miss out on most of this very essential information.
Yes, so people need to be aware of what can go wrong with thyroid, and once they know that, I think that's when they will learn to understand about, and also what to look for and when to do routine screening are the two thoughts that need to be kept in people's mind. So the first thing that they need to know is that the thyroid can enlarge in certain people. Actually, if you do a goiter study in population, it has been done in Sri Lanka, it's about 10%. So particularly in females, it's common even in children, due to a disease called thyroiditis, where inflammation of the thyroid happens, chronic autoimmune thyroiditis we call it, and therefore goiter can occur. So particularly the female young children need to be watching, the parents need to watch. Usually you don't see a lump at the root of the neck. So if a person watches the mirror and swallows a sip of water, and you see something moving on both sides of the Adam's apple, both sides of the trachea, then the voice box as we call it on both sides, then there is a lump on that. So, then that could be a goiter and that might have to be checked. So, that is one instance where people need to seek medical guidance on whether their thyroid could be wrong. Second reason why they need to be aware of is before pregnancy, it is advised that people usually check their thyroid for it, because a routine screening for thyroid, because as I said, the baby's intelligence and the brain development is dependent on mother's thyroxine and baby's availability of the thyroxine, and the early life of the baby's fetal life, there is no fetal thyroxine, only the mother's thyroxine. So, if the mother has a problem, the baby's brain development could be hampered, and because that reason, and also because 10% of the population could have a thyroid issue, particularly females, it is good idea for women before conception to have a routine thyroid test. It is not a program as such in Sri Lanka, but in other parts of the world like US, it is recommended that all women, particularly those with family history or goiter or previous thyroiditis, undergo a routine TSH before they conceive.
And doctor, is there a particular age, as you mentioned, if it's available in US and Europe and all of those, do we have a particular age that we should educate women out there that they should go and get themselves checked?
So what we call the eligible age. So anyone about 20 years should check their thyroid, particularly if there is a problem, that is, if there is a family history of a thyroid disease, or they have had a goiter or a thyroiditis in the past, or if they are going to conceive, then it is a good idea to check it.
And that's a particular subject everyone wants to know about pregnant women and trying to conceive and all of that, which has a huge impact for probably another generation or so. So, what do women need to do about it?
Yeah, so this is the crucial thing about the thyroid here, and pregnancy is the baby's intelligence. It's nothing else other than that. I shouldn't say nothing else, but there are two things here. One is that thyroxine is also a fertility hormone. So, menses and regular reproductive cycles, that is the ability to produce eggs and ovulate every month, is dependent on thyroxine as well. Not just thyroxine, but other hormones, but thyroxine will control it also. So therefore, if there is someone who is subfertile and is unable to conceive, thyroxine deficiency could be one disease. On the other hand, so subfertility is one problem. So thyroid autoimmunity or thyroiditis and hypothyroidism are two diseases that need to get checked in subfertile couples. Secondly, the other issue is that baby's thyroxine and baby's intelligence, and because we wouldn't be aware until baby is well into growth, and the baby's brain could also already be damaged. That's why we say check it beforehand, and that's the reason why a routine TSH is recommended, and that is why a thyroxine test and a treatment may be needed beforehand.
So, doctor, if you are found to be thyroxine imbalanced, what do we need to do, and how often do we need to take medication?
Yeah, so it depends on the problem. So most people do not need treatment, but if they are hypothyroid, that is, they have an inability to produce the thyroxine hormone normally, and their TSH levels are high. TSH is a hormone that comes from the brain, the pituitary hormone, to tell the thyroid to work. So when the thyroid is not working properly, the TSH is high, and that's a signal, indirect signal we look to see whether the thyroid is doing its job properly. If it's not doing it properly, the TSH is normally elevated. So if it's elevated, or if the thyroxine hormones themselves are low, then we will say they are hypothyroid. In those scenarios, particularly if they are in that fertile age and conception is a possibility, we would aggressively be recommending treatment for those people. Even if the abnormalities are only marginal. In others, if there are symptoms of hypothyroidism. Symptoms of hypothyroidism are easy to work out, because as I said, they are the thyroxine controls the rate at which the body functions, and therefore the heart rate goes down, the bowel motions become slow because they will get then constipation, the brain functions slowly, so they will be sleepy, lethargic, sometimes depressed. Their body metabolic rate goes down, so they might put on weight and have what is called myxedema, deposition of liquid, myxedematous liquid under their skin, and their cholesterol levels go up, their blood pressure might go up. So those are the abnormalities that occur in those who are hypothyroid. Normally nowadays we pick it up long before all of these features have developed, with 1 or 2 symptoms per se, with routine testing being available.
So, doctor, if a woman in the age of, say, middle-aged woman who's probably looking at conceiving, what do they need to do if they find themselves in a situation where thyroxine is imbalanced? Is there a way that they can get themselves treated before they try and conceive?
Of course, it's important, because by the time they have been diagnosed to be pregnant, that is, if when the urine test says you are pregnant, already the baby is there within the womb, about 2 to 3 weeks old baby, and that baby's brain has already been formed. At least 1 million cells in the brain has been formed, and if they were hypothyroid at that time, you can imagine the brain development was defective, and so any treatment has to go in before she became pregnant, not after. So that's why it's important to diagnose it before, at the idea of conception, not after becoming conceived. So it's a simple treatment of taking thyroxine, ensuring that the TSH is fine, the T4 levels are normal in the blood. The simple test, not so expensive, and once they are normal, then they could conceive.
And doctor, moving from this to the subject that you spoke about, that about 10% of Sri Lanka's population has this. So, what is the reason for the number to be at that level?
Yes, so in the past we have had what are called the endemic goiters and also iodine deficiency disorders. So we have had iodine deficiency in the population, and as a result, when we were medical students, like in the 80s, we would see women walking in with these large lumps in their neck, almost 1 kilo of a lump, and that's from previous iodine deficiency from their childhood. And the other problem of iodine deficiency is because mothers are hypothyroid, there was a lot of mental disorders in the population, mental disorder as in mental development being subnormal. So those two were pretty common. So what happened in the 1970s was a universal iodization program, where salt has been iodized as a compulsory. So in Sri Lanka you can't buy non-iodized salt because it's a universal food. Everybody now gets iodine, and there's a monitoring program to check that everybody gets iodine, adequate iodine. So people walk around checking urine of individuals randomly to see that they have been exposed to adequate urine. So that way the government monitors that adequate urine, urinary iodine is maintained, and therefore this iodization program is going on. So what the iodization program has done is to take away those two problems, the childhood iodine deficiency, which resulted in these mental deficiencies and lots of abortions as a result, and also the large goiters are no longer a problem. But what happens when you eradicate those is that now you get tiny goiters, slightly enlarged goiters, and thyroiditis is the end result. When you don't have those disorders, you only have thyroiditis. So our primary problem is thyroiditis. In the past, our primary problem was iodine deficiency disorders, where we would have large goiters and hypothyroidism. As time has gone, we have transitioned into no goiter or small goiter with thyroiditis, and hypothyroidism as a problem. So, it is a much less of a disease, but still we have hypothyroidism in a large population of people, which is so we do not have goiter, but thyroiditis.
So, doctor, if you may look at it, say, is there a possibility, if I may ask, that it could come through the bloodline or from generation to generation? And if the previous generation had an iodine deficiency issue, could that lead to thyroxine issue in the next generation?
Yeah, iodine deficiency per se is not hereditary, because now it's an acquired problem, as in it's a nutritional problem. It's no longer a problem in Sri Lanka, because almost everyone has sufficient iodine, if not slightly over iodized, based on how much of iodine, how much of salt they use in there. The thyroiditis and other thyroid disorders, yes, they can be acquired, they can be inherited from mother. Usually it's a disease of the females, so you can inherit it from mother to child and then to the child and so on. Yes, it can be. Certain HLA phenotypes, so called certain gene types, do predispose the child to get thyroiditis much more rapidly, and yes, that happens. It's a easily treatable condition, but if they are aware that yes, mother has it, then the children should be checked.
And from that to move into how young can you actually get this issue?
Yeah, so goiter prevalence studies are now done in school children at primary grade. So, they are grade 3, 4, 5 children. So, in them about 10% have it. So, it can occur there. Not all of them are hypothyroid, but they have already got the thyroiditis. So, as they become older, they can get hypothyroid.
So, doctor, if we are looking at the next generation, as you say, if the numbers are at 10%, is there something to do with lifestyles or food intake, or is it just a deficiency that has come from generation to generation?
Yeah. Across the world, if you look, there are multiple factors why goiters and hypothyroidism occurs. For example, in the Himalayas, it's iodine deficiency. Now they are iodizing their population compulsorily about 40 years after us. In the Andes, it used to be the same issue, because in the mountainous areas the iodine content in the salt and the water is very low, therefore they get iodine in this one. In certain areas there is goitrogens in their food, like in African and in South American populations, they eat cassava, the manioc type of food, or cabbage as their main food, and that is why people would tell, your neighbor would tell you don't eat cabbage if you have a thyroid, and that is because people who eat lots of cabbage or lots of manioc, those can be goitrogens. In some societies there are goitrogens in the water. There are thiocyanates and various other minerals in the water that binds and prevents the iodine from coming into the body. In Sri Lanka, it seems to be just the preponderance to. So, we are more modernized that way. So, it is not our other problems, we are like China and other societies where we are in an iodized, adequately iodized, iodine sufficient stage, where we only thing we see is thyroiditis in about 10% of the population, as opposed to other societies which struggle with these large goiters and aggressive cancers in the thyroid as a result, and so on. So, we are I think in a controlled manner and in a reasonably well iodine nourished population.
And from that, doctor, something of a social phenomenon that we see, as you mentioned about these large lumps in women. Is that something people need to worry about, say, just because they see them, or if they are around them, or they are in the neighborhood or something? Is there anything that they need to worry about, or it's just an isolated incident?
Yes. So this is not anything to do with that particular area, if that is what you are coming at. There are goiter bells in other countries, not in Sri Lanka. we are universal in our population risk, so to speak. We are not aware of any particular area being at risk, unlike other conditions. The goit, if there is a goiter, we ask ourselves, what is it? Is it just a water-filled bubble? Because thyroiditis can then end up in a goiter like what you described, a water-filled bubble, a colloid goiter as we call it. Rarely a person, particularly with family history and so on, or if they have a mutation for thyroid cancer, could have thyroid cancer. It is also a disease of young women of this country, not uncommon, it is there. So normally it's a single nodule that comes up. So we can now pretty firmly say whether a nodule is colloid or cancerous just by looking at it in the scan, and if necessary by doing a needle test. And if it is, in the olden days, almost all of those got removed, partly because they will all become large. Now the natural history of those goiters is not to become very large, so we can do other measures. Secondly, we can also tell confidently which one is cancer, which one is not. So we have other measures other than cancer now to do, other than surgery to treat. So if it's cancer, which is rare, we will treat them with surgery. If not, we can ablate or make them small by radioiodine technique or radio ablation, where we put a needle in and burn it off, or inject alcohol and burn it in. And so there are other techniques where we use micro techniques like a laser burn technique to just make that lump go in and be controlled. So not all goiter lumps are worrisome, not all of them require surgery. We can evaluate them pretty easily and nicely with scans and fine needle testing to tell what they are and also predict what treatment to take.
And doctor, moving from this, my next question would be to, if you have had a deficiency of this sort, do you have to take medication right through, or could this be cured?
Interesting question. So if they have thyroiditis and had hypothyroidism, about 10% recover within a year. So the answer is not everyone needs lifetime medication. Some may recover within the first year, because as thyroiditis recovers, some people may require no treatment after 1 year. But if they have had hypothyroidism for 5 to 10 years now, then we can easily say yes, it's a lifetime issue. And if it's particularly if it's coming down the genes, that if it's mother who's having lifetime disease, then it's also easy to predict what the daughter's lifetime risk will be of a lifetime treatment, because the behavior is usually alike in both generations.
So that's something to keep in mind, and we have come to the end of the show. I got to thank Dr. Noel for sharing his expertise, and as he mentioned, so anyone who's probably 20 or more years old, for women in particular in this country, it's good to try and get yourselves tested every now and then, at least on an annual basis. And if you have had family history, that's even more the opportunity for you to actually go and get yourself tested, because it could have complications with regards to conceiving and pregnancies and childbirth. So that's something to keep in mind, something of very important value for all of us to probably looking at the next generation as to what Dr. really mentioned with regards to how iodine was introduced to food, in particular in salt, to make sure that the entire country is sorted out. Here is another situation that we need to take control of and to move forward. Hope you've got something out of what Doctor mentioned. Got to thank you, Doctor, for being with us and
Pleasure.
sharing your expertise. It's time for me to say goodbye on today's edition of iMed. Until next time, it's bye-bye from me.